Come into session. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll. Seeing that we have a quorum, I now move that we go into executive session. Do I have a second? I have a second. I now move that we bring up Senate substitute for Senate Committee substitute for Senate Joint Resolution 50 for consideration. Do I have a second? Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, I now move that we do pass Senate substitute for Senate Committee substitute for Senate Joint Resolution 50. Do I have a second? I have a second. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Thompson Rader.
Aye.
Senator Bernskader. Senator Searpoint. Senator Coleman. Senator Fitzwater. Senator Koenig. Senator Rizzo. Senator Roberts. 5-0.
By your vote of 5-0, you have moved Senate substitute for Senate Committee substitute for Senate Joint Resolution 50 do pass. And let me say, we will keep the board open as we have a couple of members running late. So for their votes when they get here. I now move that we bring up House Bill 1803 for consideration. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I now move that we do pass House Bill 1803. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Thompson Rader.
Aye.
Senator Bernskader. Senator Searpoint. Senator Coleman. Senator Fitzwater. Senator Koenig. Senator Rizzo. Senator Roberts. 5-0.
By your vote of 5-0, you have moved House Bill 1803 do pass. I now move that we bring up Senate Bill 1456 for consideration. Do I have a second? I have a second. Senate Bill 1456 is now up. Do we have any discussion on this bill? This is the one that Senator Rizzo just presented to us. It's the one on the tourism fund allowing. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I move that we do pass Senate Bill 1456. Do I have a second? I have a second. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Thompson Rader.
Aye.
Senator Bernskader. Senator Searpoint. Senator Coleman. Senator Fitzwater. Senator Koenig. Senator Rizzo. Senator Roberts.
Which bill are we on?
This is Senate Bill 1456, Rizzo's on tourism.
Got it.
By your vote of 6-0, you have moved Senate Bill 1456 do pass. I now move that we bring up Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1263 for consideration. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. The bill is now up before the committee. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, this one is Senator Roberts' bill that we just heard on the ports. I now move that we do pass Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1263. Do I have a second?
I think the sub has to be adopted first.
Oh, thank you, Trey. We do have a sub, so sorry. And Senator, do you want to discuss your sub before we?
Yeah, basically, there was an original version and then the ports had some concerns, so there were just some minor tweaks, but it does the same thing. This is for the fund that was passed last session, carried by Senator Bean, and because the city of St. Louis doesn't own but manage, it just manages the ports, so it allows them to get access to the funds that they're intended to be able to receive. So there's no opposition to it, and the Missouri Ports Authority supports it as well.
And this sub was sent out to each of you a couple of days ago, Trey?
Yeah, last week we dropped off copies with everybody's
last
office.
Thursday, okay.
Yep.
Any discussion on the sub? I move that we adopt Senate Committee Sub, Senate Bill 1263. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. I now move that we vote do pass Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 1263. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Thompson Raider.
Aye.
Senator Bernskader. Senator Searpoint. Senator Coleman. Senator Fitzwater. Senator Koenig. Senator Rizzo. Senator Roberts.
Aye.
6-0.
Aye, your vote is 6-0. You have moved Senate Committee Sub for Senate Bill 1263 do pass. I now move that we go out of executive session. Do I have a second? We are out of executive session. Senator Washington, we are now ready to hear Senate Bill 794 when you are.
Thank you. Good morning, committee. Good morning, Madam Chair, and thank you for having me today. Senate Bill, I'm Barbara Washington from, you all know that, Jackson County, for those listening. This bill, Senate Bill 794, sorry, I got to get new glasses, is a simple bill. It just basically, it does need a little work. We may need to work on it a little bit, but this is to provide tax credits to those landlords that would provide housing for homeless persons. As we all know, we have a really big homeless problem in the entire state of Missouri. We've even had legislation that prevents them from sleeping on government property. And so as in my community, we have tens of thousands of people that are homeless. And if we could get landlords that would be able to have some sort of incentive to provide housing for them, many of them do work, they just are unable to get housing at this time, then that would not only increase our economy because it would give them an address, provide more tax revenue in terms of allowing them to work full time and clean up our streets and frankly help Missourians. And with that, I'm for any questions. What I would like to do though is limit this to Missouri landlords only. Because the bill is not clear, and I'd like to limit the credit to first come, first serve. They can get up to $10,000, and the total credit is $1 million.
Thank you. Do you know if any other states are doing this with tax credits?
I believe California is. They have a much larger problem than we do. In fact, there are some municipalities in California that are actually providing homeless people with money to be able to get places to live.
Got it. Do we have any questions for the sponsor? Senator Searpoint, go ahead.
Thank you. So looking at this, I just read it quickly. It's not just for, it's just not for a place to live. Is it also for other services?
Yeah,
too?
providing employment to them as well.
Okay. And is it anything else too, like food or?
No, I already got tax credits for that.
So it's just employment and their residence?
Yes, and usually if they're homeless, they are eligible for food stamps in the state of Missouri.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the sponsor? Seeing none. Anyone here wishing to testify in favor? Please be sure to fill out a witness form, and we're ready when you are.
Good morning. Oops. Hi, I'm Eric Berger, and I'm the Executive Director of Shelter KC. And Shelter KC is an emergency shelter in Kansas City. And we serve about 124 homeless individuals every night right in Kansas City. One of the reasons why I'm really interested in this bill is we have seen a dramatic change in the length of time that people are in emergency shelter. Emergency shelter is very important because we need to stabilize people. When we look at the chronic homeless population, 75% of that population that's been homeless for a year has a mental health challenge, a substance abuse challenge, or a chronic health issue. 50% have all three. And so we can do things to help stabilize people, connect to mental health services. We're a faith-based organization, so we're concerned about the whole person. But it used to be I could then get you back out into housing and employment in 30 days. It now takes about 6 months. The average amount of money that a landlord now wants is about $3,000 that you need to have banked. And I think one of the challenge becomes is that if we have folks who do have histories of abuse, substance abuse and so on, the landlord has a risk there. And so they're wanting more and more money up front to make sure that that person really is stabilized. And I think this then gives an incentive that yes, they're still going to look at that person's current history, but maybe they're more willing to take a risk. Our concern is our front door now is backed up. It usually takes 3 to 5 days wait to get into emergency shelter because we don't want to prematurely exit people before they're ready. And so I'm encouraged that this is something that could help that backstop. So any questions you have about homelessness, I don't know that I can answer all of them, but I can give you what they are. I think my last thing is my experience, there is no one answer to anything. What we need to do is we need to have solutions that we can put in the toolbox that organizations like us can use. So there is no magic pill, but I do think this is something that could be another piece in the toolbox.
Well, thank you for that. We appreciate your work and appreciate you being here today. Do we have any questions for this witness?
I just have a quick one.
Senator?
Thank you. So the way this will work then is if a person donates money to a shelter, they get the tax credit. Is that kind of what it's set up for? It's not for getting them in an apartment. It's to the shelter itself.
No, my understanding is this would give an incentive to landlords that they would receive a tax credit for accepting a homeless person.
Okay, so it's not for the shelter itself then? Okay.
No.
I want to make sure of
And
that. Thank
so-
you very much.
Is the tax credit in lieu of rent or on top of rent? So the homeless person, so like they're still, so they're still paying their rent. It's not to get, it's to incentivize.
It's to incentivize the landlord to provide the homeless an opportunity to have shelter. So right now we do, as he stated, we do have landlords who won't even look at them unless they have all that money up front. And frankly, we have landlords that are, to their credit, they're trying to protect themselves, but they're actually asking for more than the statutes actually permit them to ask for. They're doing more than last month's rent and deposits. So this would provide them an opportunity to know that, hey, if I can rent to this guy if he doesn't have $4,000 or $5,000, because our rent in Kansas City is really expensive right now. So maybe you don't have $1,500 a month or whatever the case may be, but I know I'm going to get some protection because by providing shelter, then I know I can write some of this off on my taxes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Please be sure to leave your witness form.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in favor? Anyone wishing to testify against? Anyone for informational purposes only? Seeing none, this concludes our hearing on Senate Bill 794. Thank you, Senator. Do you have any closing comments?
I just want to say that we know that there is a problem. You have families, you have single people from domestic violence, you have veterans, and you have youth. And we are addressing some of those. We have the Veterans Community Project, who's been really good. In fact, by doing the Veterans Community Project with the tiny houses, it's actually incentivized the Veterans Administration in my district to build a whole new apartment complex for those who don't go to the Veterans Community Project. So we just want to extend those same type of courtesies to those who have served or not served so that we can get them off the streets. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We also had Senate Bill 1475 on the list, but I don't see Senator. Excellent. Okay. So he is on his way. We'll hold for just a second. Senate Bill 1475, Senator Trent, we are ready when you are.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Curtis Trent, representing Senate District 20. Senate Bill 1475, fairly straightforward, provides that City of St. Louis shall not continue to impose an earnings tax without submitting quarterly report detailing receipts from said tax. There is requirements that they be basically posted on websites and submitted to the auditor, to the Secretary of the Senate, appropriations, clerk of the House, and House Committee Budget Chair. Also provides that tax returns filed on or after January 1, 2025, provides that the term work or services performed or rendered in the city shall not include any work or services performed or rendered through telecommuting or otherwise performed or rendered remotely, unless the location where such services or work is performed is located inside the city, and also provides a mechanism, a process for taxpayers to request a refund for any earnings tax levied on services that are performed through telecommuting that are inadvertently collected by the city. Again, think this is a fairly reasonable principle that we should not have a global taxation, so to speak, for a city. It should taxation should occur where the economic activity occurs. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you. Do we have anyone wishing to testify in favor? Please come forward and be sure to fill out witness form. We're ready when you are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my witness form's online. Ray McCarty, Associated Industries of Missouri, want to go on record in support of this, particularly the part that prohibits the city of St. Louis from applying their earnings tax to work that's not performed within the city. Up until the pandemic, the city always made refunds for, in fact, you filled out a form and said what days you worked in the city, which days you worked outside the city, and you were able to only pay tax on the part when you were inside the city. But during the pandemic, because a lot of people were working remotely, the city decided to change course and apply the earnings tax to everyone that had been in the city but was no longer working in the city. I think it presents a 14th Amendment question. And if the state isn't able to impose that kind of a tax on non-residents, then certainly the city shouldn't have that ability either as a political subdivision of the state. So we're happy to answer any questions, but that's the main part of the bill that we're supporting.
Got it. Any questions for this witness?
Yeah, and
Koenig?
there's been some Supreme Court cases specifically on charging something like an income tax on people who are not physically there. Is that correct?
That's exactly right, Senator. And there's a case pending now. I don't think it's been resolved yet, but it keeps bubbling through the courts. I think eventually the courts will find that they aren't able to do that. It's interesting, during the same pandemic, Kansas City allowed people who were working remotely to have the refunds. St. Louis did not. So you only have two areas of the state that have earnings taxes, Kansas City and St. Louis. Kansas City did the right thing, in our opinion. St. Louis tried to go too far, we believe. And we were in constant contact with the city, and they didn't really have any basis for it. They were just like, they're going to do it and hope that you request a refund. The other thing about that is you can only go back so far with your refund claims. And so they made the refund claims extremely hard to get to. So this bill, we think, would help.
Senator Searport?
Thank you. So doesn't the present state law say that if you're not living or working in the city, you don't pay?
Yeah, their ability to, it's a locally imposed tax, but their ability to impose the tax is only if you live in the city or work in the city.
Right.
And they're trying to say that if you work remotely for someone that's in the city, for a company that's in the city, then you still have to pay the earnings tax. That's just not the way it works.
Well, I know I worked in Kansas City and paid it for 45 years. And,
Right.
I always, in Kansas City, like you said, did it very, very well because I used to, my office was downtown, but if I didn't go downtown, I didn't pay the tax. I kept track of it on my day planner and did the report. But I never thought Kansas City did that out of the goodness of their heart. I thought that was the state law.
I believe it's even constitutional law. I'm
So
not a lawyer. but I
why,
believe-
when St. Louis was doing this, did people complain, or do they have to go to court to get a court order? Or, I mean, how do they? It
Well-
seems like it's this present law is kind of doing what we're doing here.
Right.
It's just restating it.
It's restating the constitutional law and the state statute, but the city just refused.
So we
They-
think doing it twice in state law will make them do it where once doesn't?
Well, hopefully, once clarifying, maybe that'll put the thumb on the scale of justice there. I don't know, but paying attention to the Constitution is really important.
No, I agree. I just question whether doing it twice or 3 times is going to make them do something that they're ignoring now.
Yeah, we
And
don't know.
This part, I didn't read it that closely. Does this say, because if you live in the city, it doesn't matter where you go.
That's
It
correct.
doesn't matter where you work.
That's correct.
So if you go outside the city limits to remotely work,
Right.
you still, this doesn't
No,
nix that.
if you're working remotely from an area within the city, the language in the bill would still tax that.
Or if you're working remotely outside the city, but you live in the city.
That's
it'll
correct.
Still, okay, thank you.
When you mentioned a lawsuit, so is there a current lawsuit with someone who has had to pay this tax and it's against our current laws, so they're
That's
working
right.
it?
That's right, Madam Chair. There is a lawsuit pending, and it's brought, the problem with this is the earnings tax is not necessarily enough for any one particular taxpayer to take it up on their own, because by the time you add the attorney's fees and everything in, it's not enough money. I think it's a class action lawsuit, or at least one that involves several taxpayers.
Got it, okay. Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. Anyone else wishing to testify in favor? Anyone wishing to testify against? We are ready when you are.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is Jackie Barget. I'm a registered lobbyist here on behalf of the City of St. Louis to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 1475. Thank you. I do just want to give a little background about the earnings tax. I think some of you are very familiar with it, have sponsored legislation in the past, but the earnings tax is the largest revenue generator for the City of St. Louis. It accounts for about 1/3 of their general revenue fund. It is a 1% flat tax across the board. It was implemented in 1950s. It has not changed since the 1950s, like a lot of other cities that have earnings tax who have raised that or changed it. In the past, it is an earnings tax. It is not an income tax, so it is only applied to salary, wages, tips, and compensation. It is not applied to unemployment, retirement, or a lot of other things that income tax are applied to. Total receipts from the earnings tax last fiscal year for the City of St. Louis were a little over $219 million, which I said earlier is about 37% of the city's general revenue fund, and is a major contributor to the city's ability to provide municipal resources to its citizens and those that visit the City of St. Louis. You all should have received this, but if you have not, I'm going to turn this in with my witness statement. It's a letter from the City of St. Louis Fire Chief, Chief Jenkerson, just outlining kind of his opposition in general to any encroachment or reduction of the earnings tax without some type of supplemental revenue source. He is concerned with state changes that would infringe on the earnings tax and the ability of the fire and EMS department's ability to keep both residents and the millions of people that come to the City of St. Louis to visit safe while they're there. In regards to Senator Trent's bill specifically, during the pandemic, as you all know, remote and telecommuting work increased absolutely rapidly compared to how many people were working from home remotely prior to that. Cities across the country that have earnings tax kind of took a step back and tried to figure out, and it was unprecedented times, what they were going to do to move forward and how they were going to address that. The City of St. Louis chose that they would continue to refund remote work done outside of the city as long as it was not done from home. There's a lot of things that I cannot articulate because there is a court case going on, but I'll try and answer as many questions as I can when we get done. But of the cities that have earnings taxes, there was not one response that was made. There were a lot of wide and varying approaches that were taken from that. Our state statute provides a remedy for taxpayers who feel that they have the tax assessed that they feel have been unfairly taxed, or they have issues with that, and there have been 6 plaintiffs that have taken action with that, and that is the court case that is currently going on. that court case is currently making its way through the legal process, and whatever decision is made, the collector of revenue in the city of St. Louis is absolutely more than willing and will abide by that decision. And we feel that that is the best route for this issue to be remedied. And I guess with that, I'll take any questions that you guys might have.
Senator?
I just can't believe a world when the city of St. Louis is trying to tax my constituents in St. Louis County when they didn't step foot in St. Louis City. Like, not only is that unconstitutional, like the plain reading of any kind of income tax anywhere in the United States does not work that way.
And
I mean, it's just highly offensive that the city of St. Louis would do something like that. And I understand that the pandemic hurt lots of people, but they hurt lots of people in every area. People were getting sick. People were losing their jobs. All right? So that doesn't give you a right to tax someone when they don't step foot in the city of St. Louis. And it sounds like you're testifying specifically against Section 4 of the Senator's bill, subsection 4, on page 1.
And I assume, is this the, I will say, we are opposed to the entire bill. There are other parts of his bill requiring reporting and other things, and although that is burdensome, I don't think the city has any, they're as transparent as possible about what they're collecting or not. And the only thing I will say, again, I think the courts are where we think that this should be settled, but the court is deciding. It's all statutory interpretations, and I get your frustration. Don't get me wrong. That's why there are 6 plaintiffs that are willing to take this to the courts to see if they can get remedy on this. But I will just say it's a statutory interpretation that various cities across the country have been interpreting differently.
Senator Searport?
Thank you. So if the court rules against the city, we'll be in the world that this bill would put us in anyway, right?
Correct.
So that's why I don't understand why you're against it, unless you think the court's going to say you got to pay taxes even if you don't set foot in the city.
I think I don't know what the court's going to decide, but I feel like the city thinks that the courts are the revenue that, or the avenue that this should be decided in, and I don't know. I truly don't know what the court's decision, because there might be class action lawsuits, there might not. I don't know what the fiscal implications are of the court decision compared to the senator's legislation. They don't tell me a lot for a lot of reasons, so that just because there is an ongoing legal case, but I can probably figure out a lot, some fiscal differences between the two, if that might be helpful as well.
And just in general, the way this earnings tax works, if you don't live in the city, if you live in the city but don't work in the city, they don't take it out of your paycheck, right?
If you live in the city, regardless of where you work, the 1% earnings tax is.
That's not true. In Kansas City, it's not. Only if you work in the city do they take it out of your paycheck. And so if you live in the city but work someplace else, if you work in Kansas City, for instance, if you work out in Olathe, Kansas, they're not taking the 1% out. So does the cities have the ability to, what ability does the city have to enforce that?
I don't know if I'm following your question 100%, but I believe the way that it's written in statute right now is work performed or rendered in the city.
Or if you live in the city.
Or if you live in the city.
Right. But if you live in the city, your employer is not withholding it. Only employers in the city are withholding it.
Yes.
And so how do they?
So I get what you're saying now. So if you are a resident of the city of St. Louis, you receive a form from the Collector Revenue's office during tax season that says you, as a city resident, you are subject to 1% of your earnings.
It's voluntarily reported.
And you turn in your W-2s, 1099s.
And so if you make $70,000 outside the city, but you live in the city, they send you a form, you send them $700.
Correct. And
That's how we think it works.
yes,
Okay, and if they don't, what happens?
I think the collector of revenue knows who is living within the city, and if you
Could you
are,
find that out? Because
yes, I will.
I'm not sure that's true.
Okay, yeah, I will. I'll get an actual breakdown of everything for you and to you. And the city is currently in the process of updating. They do everything by paper right now and putting everything online, which I think is supposed to make things a little easier and more streamlined as well.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify against? Anyone wishing to testify for informational purposes only? Seeing none, this concludes our hearing on Senate Bill 1475. Senator, do you have any closing comments?
Madam Chair, I would just again reiterate that this also, in addition to the restatement of the law that was mentioned, it also creates the oversight by the reporting to the General Assembly, the Auditor, Secretary of State, and it requires the creation of a reimbursement process for folks who are wrongly taxed. And so I think those are both valuable additions to the situation that we have here. I appreciate your consideration and the consideration of the committee.
Thank you so much. This concludes our hearing on Senate Bill 1475. With no other business coming before the committee, we are adjourned.